I've been on the search for a universal adapter system for my setup here at home that would be easy to install and at the end of the day, be as similar as possible to a real shafted iron. After spending some time looking online, I finally came across the All Fit Master System, which seemed like it had the best chance of solving those problems for me. Today, we're going to look at the benefits of this system, work through setting up the shafts and heads that I have here at home, and ultimately see how it performs in comparison to a shafted iron. So maybe if you're in the market for something like this yourself, you can determine if it's right for you. Let's go. Welcome to Cloudy Coast Golf Co. My name's Johnny, and today, like I said, we're getting things set up to do a little testing at home with the All Fit Master System. There are a lot of different options to work through based on the type of clubs that you're ultimately looking to test, but today we're just going to be focusing on the irons. I've got a variety of steel, graphite, and wedge shafts here that I'm going to be putting together to do some testing with at a later date, utilizing either my Apex CB or an older PXG wedge I've had lying around for a while. So let's talk about how the system works, the benefits of going with this particular system, and then work through how to get things installed on the different shafts and club heads that I've selected here to hopefully do some testing at the end of the day to compare how they ultimately perform relative to a shafted iron. You'll have a variety of different options and sizes to ultimately choose from, but today I'm just going to be working with the All Fit Master Hosel, which is a 0.37, as well as the 0.355. Which is going to work for the graphite, steel, iron shafts that I have and the steel wedge shafts that I'm going to be putting in today. One thing to take note of is just the 0.37. So if you're going to be doing a utility iron or something like that, the 0.37 also works with the Master Hosel adapter there. So both the 0.355 and the 0.37, the taper tip and the parallel tip both fit into this guy alone. If you're also interested, they do offer a utility series too. So it's a little bit shorter than the iron one here, but this is for utility irons. And then that's the shaft adapter for that piece as well. This piece here is just going to be the torque wrench, which is used to fasten the shaft to the adapter. At the end of the day, we'll cover that a little bit more in depth down the road. And then this is also the drill bit that they offer on their website, and this is a 11.2 millimeter bit, or like a 7/16, I believe, also satisfies that measurement there as well. But from everything that I've read from them, it's probably best just to go with that, and I guess it definitely does make a difference on the overall assembly. Out of the packaging here, the overall setup really is not that complicated. You've got the Hosel adapter, which is a nice piece of milled either aluminum, or I read online that it was titanium. I didn't really see anything on the packaging from the All Fit website. The shaft adapter piece here, and you can see they have laser etched the details of what this piece is on the side. And then a retaining nut. This feels a little bit lighter, so this is probably more in that aluminum house, and then a gasket as well. And the way that this is all going to eventually go together, you're going to have the Hosel adapter, which is going to sit in the hosel of the club head. And then that's just going to thread into the shaft adapter. And there's a couple different indexes here that this will feed in. And you can see there closely, there's a couple teeth. So you'll have that lined up. There is a line on the back of this, which is oriented right in line with the laser etching that they have there. And then you'll just match that up with the one that is on the Hosel adapter as well, which is also matched up with the laser etching. You'll attach those two pieces together, as you can see there. You'll then thread that together like so, and you'll torque it down with the included wrench that comes with the system. And so basically, as far as the install goes, I've got the 7-iron and the Apex CB here, and I'll also be utilizing a PXG 0311 forged sand wedge as well. And all you got to do once we break those down individually, you're just going to take the 11.2 millimeter drill bit. You're going to drill it out to the depth of the Hosel adapter, and then obviously cleaning everything up. We're going to prep all the tips, make sure everything's sanded and ready for the epoxy. We're going to get things put together. There are going to be a couple things that we're going to be talking about through the install. We'll go in depth a little bit more, and a lot of that has to go with the indexing of that writing, as well as the little notch that you can see on both of those adapters, just to make sure that it's oriented well with the graphics in order to have as clean of an install as possible. One of the things I did want to compare on this install is just to see how this adapter changes the overall weight of the club head and any swing weight differences as well. So I'm going to be working with a Apex CB from Callaway. I've got a 7-iron here. Right now it has a Project X 6.5 shaft in it. It's 3/4 of an inch long. The swing weight came in at D 2.6. And then a total weight of 455.5 grams. I'm going to put all that information in at the bottom here so we can kind of see how those differences shake out as well. So with that being said, let's kick things off with the install. All right, getting things set up for the first part of the process here is really just going to be the prep phase, like I talked about, getting the club head set up to be drilled out, and then ultimately prepping the golf shafts and the adapters for the hosel and for the tip of the golf shaft as well. So I'm going to break these things down. I got a blowtorch here. I'm going to be kind of just using this. You could also attach it in a vise if you have that available, but really I'm just gonna torch it and just get these club heads pulled off. This doesn't really matter that much since we're gonna be drilling out the majority of it, but just wanna clean it up as much as I can. Next one up, the Apex CB. All right, so I got these two set up here. I'm gonna get some weights. All right, so here's one of the first things I want to check out from an organizational standpoint and trying to be as accurate as possible. So I've got both the shafts pulled out of each of these irons, and I did want to compare kind of how the regular seated depth of the irons that would be playing in the shaft would compare with the depth of the shaft adapter, or excuse me, the hosel adapter itself, and then how that's ultimately going to play with the shaft adapter ultimately when both of those pieces come together. Kind of the method that I've come up with to try to mitigate this to the best I can is when I do end up drilling this head out, the game plan is to get when I'm doing the dry fitting, to have the actual hosel adapter in there, and then I will fit the shaft in, and then whatever that depth ends up coming to with that extension at the bottom of the shaft adapter, I'm going to mark a line, and then that's going to ultimately be the depth that I'll plan on seating the shaft adapter on each of these clubs to. So just another step that's in there, but again, maybe that'll save me having to grind out a little bit at the end, and then should be as accurate as possible at the end of the day. One more thing to note, and I did just notice this as I was taking these apart, but do compare just depending on the type of head that you are going with. If you're making the setup with multiple shafts, there is the possibility that where that plane depth is ultimately going to be, depending on the club that you're utilizing, it could be different. And whether that's going to be iron head versus wedge head, or if you're working with some kind of utilities, just maybe something to keep in the back of your mind when you are doing these individual setups. All right, so getting things ready to put in the drill press here and to drill out the hosels for both of the adapters on these irons. So we got the 11.2 millimeter bit. This is the one directly from Allfit. Seems like pretty decent quality, nice and sharp. Haven't used it yet. So additionally, like I had seen online a couple times, the 7/16 sound like it should work and still fit the dimensions for the hosel adapter as well. All I'm going to be looking for here is to measure the drill bit with the hosel adapter in order to establish that depth that I'm going to be going for. And that's just going to be right up against that collar that's on the actual adapter itself. Just for me personally, and just how I'm kind of reading into this. So I'm not going to measure from the tip of the bit. Just going to be doing really from the shoulder, and that's ultimately going to be where that material is getting removed. So I'm kind of taking the deepest portion of the tip of that bit, which looks like it's going to be that side. And I'm just going to go ahead and match that up with the actual collar of the hosel adapter itself, and then throw some masking tape on the drill bit just to know where that depth is going to be. And just because you always want to measure twice and you don't want to mess it up, just kind of working right on that corner there. You can see good depth there, and then the other cutting tooth on the other side. You can see good depth overall there. So I'm gonna get that plugged into the bit. We're gonna get the club head set up in the vise and get to work. see how things shook out with that before we get things cleaned. And it's right on it. 7 irons in, we're getting this one knocked out. 7 irons done. Just doing a dry fit again on that. And good to go. All right, 2 different things that I was talking about before that I want to get into a little bit. And this is really one of the most important things when you're doing any kind of assembly thing like this or any DIY project like I've done in the past, but kind of planning ahead, dry fitting, and then just going through the process before you really start getting like the epoxy going in this situation. But what I did before, like you saw, was dry fitting. This is the wedge. So you can see dry fitting that total depth of the wedge in there before we did any drilling, and still getting some metal pieces out of that guy. And with this dry fitting method, the thing I wanted to point out was with that hosel adapter in there and with the shaft adapter in there, since we already pre-tested that the depth was true to the bottom of that hosel, if we insert it all the way into the club head and make sure it's seated all the way with both of those adapters in place, I just went in and marked a line right at where the top of that shaft adapter comes to. So from here and how you want to prep, you know that that's going to be your prep depth. So when you pull that out, everything below that is ultimately going to be fair game. But really the only portions that we're going to be epoxying at the end of the day, and this is also covered with oil. We haven't done any of that prep stuff yet, but you can see just the difference on where that adapter needs to sit and then how much actual excess is at the bottom there. And even though I don't have any official guidance on this to say that this is how it's going to work out, the principle kind of seems like it should be totally fine and really give you that shafted depth length for the flex profile that we're ideally going with on these golf clubs. And just to run through it one more time, just for this process for myself and then also for anybody watching this. So we have the club head that we're going to be installing these on. We got the adapter for the hosel that's going to be going in. We got the shaft adapter that's going to be pieced in there as well. Get those indexed initially, and this is just for the depth first. We're going to talk about something else in terms of alignment out at the gate, and you can see there that black line matches right up with it. From here, kind of up to you on what you want to do. If you want to do some masking tape to kind of set a line, I think just in terms of organization and not losing this stuff with the multiple lines on it, I'll probably just do the masking tape here. And that'll also be good for the graphite too, just to make sure I don't go over on any of those. So when you get that matched up, pretty good right at the line, pop that out. You can see what I was talking about in terms of just that extra tip depth. So pretty close to about a 1/16 of an inch there. But really it's not going to matter because shaft adapter is there, hosel adapter is there, and then you have that depth excess in the actual hosel of the club head. We're going to get moving through the rest of the graphite shafts here. Some of these probably are going to take a little bit longer because even though there is a little bit of tipping done to it out the gate, there is a pretty tight fit on some of these. So I'm going to be probably having to do a progressive build out here in order to just make sure that all of these are fitting well. Here we go. All right, so as you can see here, I got all 4 of the graphite shafts matched up right at the depth of that steel shaft. And that was much easier than trying to do any kind of dry fitting, just given the fact that the depth is going to fit in all those. So I'm going to get things set up here and start grinding these off. All right, I'm working through the shaft prep portion here. I'm going to be starting out with the dynamic gold that I was doing those original measurements with and used as a template for the graphite shaft. So like I mentioned, the shaft adapter for the all fit system does fit on this one nicely. So I'm going to get that tip prepped, and then I'll move on to the graphite shafts And just, I'm gonna be taking my time on this because I really don't want to be taking off too much material as I'm trying to work to get that fit. So you can see there's really not too much that needs to come off. Mostly it's gonna be paint, but I wanna make sure that there's gonna be a good solid surface there for that to adhere to. All right, next thing, we got the tips of the shafts prep. Now we're gonna work on all the adapters and the club heads as well, just to get things roughed up in order to prep them for the epoxy prior to cleaning them up with some acetone before doing that. There are a couple of different bits and stuff that you can get that would go on the inside. I could also use the wire brush like I have on here as well. I just don't want to necessarily be holding it. One easy thing to do, you could just take a piece of sandpaper, roll it up to about that size, and then just work it back and forth. The nice thing about these pieces with them being milled, and it is kind of tough to see, but you can see notches kind of up and down the entire cylinder there. And that's also going to be on the inside. You can kind of pick that up there. So definitely a lot of different surfaces for the epoxy to adhere to. So I'm not too worried about it. Just want to get a little bit of sandpaper on it just to give us the best surface as possible. All right, the next part here, even though we had drilled these out, I did hit this with a little bit of acetone just to get some of the oil out from this, but I've got that wire brush. I'm just gonna use this. This has been a method that I've been using since I basically started doing this DIY stuff, and I've really had no issues using this over something like sandpaper. So I'm just gonna hit that with the power drill for a little bit. And the last step here is just gonna be acetone. You can pick up something like this at Home Depot. Or I've seen people use nail polish remover in the past, which does have acetone in it as well. This is a pretty corrosive thing, so just be careful with it. Use eye protection if you need to. Just watch getting it on your hands. Just make sure you're washing up afterwards if you are unfamiliar with it. But I feel like if you're doing any of this kind of stuff with your clubs, you're probably pretty used to dealing with stuff like this. So just gonna go through here, gonna wipe everything down as well as the shafts, and then get everything set up for the assembly with the epoxy, which we'll do on the next step here. All right, so one of the things I wanted to check in on before starting to put these things together is just kind of see how everything shook out after drilling out the head and how that compared to the initial weight. So we got 262.5 grams compared to the 268.4 before we bored it out. And so once we start adding all of the different pieces for the all fit system, you can see we're finishing up at 268.9 grams now. So that's coming in only half a gram heavier than just the raw club head weight itself. One of the things we weren't measuring before was a ferrule. So honestly, it's probably pretty much a 1-for-1 exchange on weight, which is pretty cool when we're trying to look to keep that as similar from a playing perspective, looking at swing weights and something I won't really have to manage too much. One thing I did think of after the fact, which I think this could end up being pretty neat when I am trying to do some fitting and stuff for myself with these different types of shafts, is with the all fit system having that hollow tip. If you did want to, based on some swing weight changes and things that you were doing, whether it's graphite or whether it's steel, that tip is accessible to ultimately put a tip weight in there if you wanted to. That would obviously change a little bit with the depth, but would give you an option there if you wanted to do something like that compared to doing just like some lead tape on the club head. All right, last part of the dry fitting process here, like we had discussed earlier, there's a couple of things to pay attention to on each of these adapters. There is a notch on both the hosel adapter, which you can kind of see there. The laser etching for the font is kind of worn out after sanding it down a little bit. And then as well for the shaft adapter, which you can see that one's still lined up with it. So when you are putting these two pieces together, you can see those notches are going to match up accordingly, and that seats down nice and tight. ultimately you'll take that nut, which will be on the shaft, which I need to not forget to put on the shaft before putting these together. And you try to not do that at home either. And ultimately that is going to sit in the club head when the shaft is on there. So you'll see with the hosel adapter in there alone, let me take the shaft adapter out here. You can see each of those 4 notches will kind of be lined up either north and south and then east and west on the target line too. So you want to just make sure that that notch is seated right on the back side of it. And then also that's just going to work in upstream for the shaft as well. So got the dynamic gold tour issue here, which is going to be going on one of these. And if you want that logo down, like I like to play with specifically, you can go through and set up that notch to be in line with where that logo is. So when you are epoxying everything together, you know where that's going to be. And all you have to do there, since you already have the masking tape on, you can just kind of mark a little line where you want that to be set up to match up with where that logo is on the bottom. I'm going to go through and do that with each of the graphite shafts that I have here, and we'll start getting the epoxy mixed together. All right, so I ran through the dry fitting of everything one more time. I've got each of the golf shafts indexed with where the shaft adapter is ultimately going to go, and then I've got each of the club heads as well with where the hosel adapter is going to be set up. We're going to get going into the epoxy here and start getting things put together. All right, getting moving on the epoxy portion of things here. I'm going to be working with a GolfWorks tour set plus epoxy. I got this in clear for both of them. This is a 1-to-1 ratio and a 35-minute-ish gel time. Probably be around that just with the temperature in the basement here. And it's playing strength in about 60 to 90 minutes. So this is just going to be sitting overnight anyway, so nothing I need to worry about too much. Really, I'm just going to be putting this together on a simple scale you can pick up at Amazon. I think this is like 10 bucks. And one of the nice things with it, you just want something with a timer, because what I'll do is just hack this once I get things together to start mixing, and you kind of have an idea of where that gel time is ultimately going to end up being. Prep in advance is a huge thing, so you want to make sure to have all that stuff together. I knew I was going to try to do it, so make sure you're getting the nuts and everything set up on those shafts in advance. I'm probably going to break and do that right now so I don't forget, because obviously once you're getting these adapters on, the nuts are not going to make their way over any of that. So I'm going to do that now and get back to it. So just kind of in an effort here to not have these things kicking around when I am doing the installs, I'm just going to throw a piece of masking tape to try to keep those in one spot. All right, we're back. I got all the nuts and the gaskets installed. I've got all the tips and everything and the hosel adapter set up. We're gonna get the epoxy mixing, and I'm just gonna be using some centering beads in here. I do this with all the shafts, and I feel like it just makes it makes that adhesion a little bit better, and then as well, like just make sure that everything is as centered up as possible. So like I said, 1-to-1 on here. I'll probably doing about 3 grams of each. Don't have to go too crazy with that, just get a little bit in. Really got no guidance on that, but about like a gram anytime I'm doing a lot tends to be about the most that I'll use at any point in time. And now just with the kebab stick, I'm gonna go in and hit the clock and start mixing this for a minute before getting things put together. All right, there's a minute. We're gonna do the hosels first. So like I said, got everything prepped, everything clean. We've got the indexes on here. All the nuts, to remind myself, are installed on the shafts. And we got things, we're ultimately gonna be installing it once we get the epoxy on and get that notch on the hosel adapter set up in there. And one thing with this, I'm just trying to think of as I'm putting it together, since there is gonna be some free space at the bottom of this, I don't wanna be having a bunch of epoxy kind of sitting in the bottom of the hosel. So I'm gonna try to keep this pretty clean in terms of the amount that I'm putting in. There really is not that much room to play around as far as how this fits into it. So it shouldn't really be too much of an issue. And then just gonna try to work to not get anything on the threads here for myself down the road. I'm just gonna get this in. Just kind of twisting it. As it goes in, again, kind of protecting the threads there a little bit if I can. Worst case, just go to town with it on some acetone at a later date. All right, number 2 there, I'm probably gonna end up doing a little bit less epoxy. I really kind of pushed out quite a bit. And then getting things lined up. Got the notch set up nice and close there. All right, I'm gonna get the second club head here and then get moving on to the shafts. All right, moving on to the golf shafts here. One of the things I did do, and this is largely just a carryover from stuff that I've seen anytime I'm doing adapters or golf shafts, just throw a little bit of masking tape on there. I feel like it does help in preventing any kind of creep with the piece as there is curing, or if there's any air bubbles or anything in there. So that's just something I've kind of picked up early on when I started doing this stuff to my own golf clubs. So again, kind of continuing with the less is more mentality, just given the tolerance and play that there is here, but just want to make sure that we have everything covered, and then we're just going to be getting the excess off of it. So just going to getting some of that on the shaft nice and evenly spread out on the tip there, and then going to do the same on the inside. Just give it a swirl, just make sure that it's at least completely coated. And then again, just pushing it on. We're gonna look to get it indexed. I'm gonna spin it on kind of just like I did before. And you can see just in terms of the amount of tolerance that's on there, we're really just getting all of that extra epoxy is just getting pushed out. So you can really kind of gauge how much you need from piece to piece, just depending on what you're seeing there. So give it a couple more spins and just get it right up against the masking tape there, which we measured off before for that depth. And then just getting that indexed nicely with the writing and the marking that we did before. And you can see kind of where that's pushing out a little bit on the top. Just cleaning, I'm gonna clean that off as well. Just set us up as good as possible. Just double check that everything is lined up there. And then just gonna throw a piece of masking tape on. And then move on to the rest. All right, last one up here. Gonna get over 20 minutes on this. Really been trying to do a good job at cleaning each of these up as I go along. One of the things just to note is probably just go a little bit lighter on the epoxy on the inside of the shaft adapter here, or at least be aware of when you are putting it on, just getting some epoxy in the tip of the graphite shaft. So just something to think of, and just make sure you're checking at the end of it that if there is any epoxy in there, you're cleaning that up. If you don't want any of that to be built up, and you can see there, I mean, that was still a very light, probably the lightest application of any of the ones that I had put together so far, and still quite a bit of excess there. All right, I got everything knocked out. I got it set aside here to cure. I'm just gonna let it go overnight. But did take my time with each of the individual pieces, ensuring that any of that additional epoxy was cleaned up. With how tight those fittings are with the milling, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna be fighting any of that in the subsequent days as I was trying to use these over the weekend. But game plan is to come back down tomorrow, see how everything looks, get the masking tape off. I'm gonna be cutting it to length, and then we'll be doing some testing. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, it's day 2 down in the basement. I got the masking tape off all of the club heads and golf shafts, and the epoxy is completely dry. And in general, everything came out quite well. Pretty happy with the fit and finish ultimately of all of the tips and the hosel adapters. Just a little bit of epoxy to clean up on the end, so I'm just gonna hit that with a bit of acetone. I did do some dry fitting with each of the tips, and you can see the two masking tape, the two shafts with masking tape still on them here. They weren't quite seating all the way. So what I am gonna do is just knock the tips down a little bit with the sanding belt in order to get that to seat completely. And then I'll be heading over to the tape measure here, get things measured up to cut the length prior to putting the grips on. And then I'm gonna head up into the garage and see how these perform. All right, I made it into the garage, just hit a couple balls, do a little warm up here. I'm gonna be throwing the X100 in, just grabbing a couple shots, and then run through all the other graphite shafts that I put together and just kind of see how things feel, how they perform relative to what I would ultimately expect. Before continuing on with this video, did you know that 99+% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribers? If you've made it this far in the video, chances are you're enjoying it enough to click that subscribe button down below. It would mean a great deal to me to have your support, and it will only help me grow what I'm doing on this channel in an effort to provide high quality content to those of you at home. And I promise I will try to improve at every single level along the growth of this channel to better serve those of you who are viewing this at home. Thank you. Now let's get back to it. Now let's kick things off with a debrief here and talk about how things went. First and foremost, everything survived, and whether that was the shaft adapters or the hosel adapter on the 7-iron head itself, I had no issues with putting the shafts together, changing them out, and ultimately the durability of the fitting between the two parts. I hit 40 shots amongst the 5 shafts and I had absolutely no issues. The great feel and feedback on all of the shafts together, and the profile of this system is clean at address and doesn't really distract you when you're trying to address the ball in any way. Stability on this system and through either fat, thin, or off-centered strikes on the club heads was exactly what I would expect from a feel standpoint, and I had very good awareness through all of the adapters as to where I was striking the ball on the club face. So overall, something that was very important to me when I am going to be doing this testing throughout the years to come and trying to have an understanding of how these different pieces of equipment are ultimately performing in comparison to one another. Now let's talk about some quick pros and cons. On the pro side of the house, and this is something that I addressed in the beginning of the video, but it was weight concerns and the comparison to an actually shafted iron. And really, as far as weight goes, from the previous assembled weight to the weight now with the master system in the 7-iron, I only saw a 0.5 gram weight increase and just under or around 0.1 of a swing weight in comparison to the 7-iron shafted with the Project X 6.5 that was in there previously. In terms of use of this system, switching between heads and shafts was something that really took no time at all. The only issue that I did have was not knowing maybe how hard I should be tightening down the screw, but I just kind of used a reasonable amount of force and tried to not over torque it too much in one way or another. So that was just maybe something I might need to look into a little bit further, but I had no security issues with any of the assemblies that I was putting together. And then lastly, this entire process as a whole, despite needing some major pieces of equipment like the drill press or obviously the weight systems and stuff like that in order to get the shaft completely set up, the entire process from an assembly standpoint was relatively simple. And for me doing it as a first timer really took minimal effort at the end of the day. Now let's talk about the cons for this system. And really this is the only one that I can think of when looking at the setup and what I've been exposed to so far. But this is a very permanent change to the club head compared to other systems that exist out there. So ultimately, that's going to be something that you're going to have to take into account if you do want to be able to repurpose the head at a later date. This is not going to be the option for you just with the drilling and then ultimately the permanent effect that you are having on the club head itself. So with that being said, I'm excited to have the system set up at the house and looking forward to the ability to test various shafts side by side, eliminating as many factors as I possibly can. If this is something that you have experience with at home, and whether that's the all-fit master system itself or some of the other shaft adapter options that exist out there, specifically in the driver category, because that's going to be something I'm going to be looking to get into down the road. Let me hear it down below in the comments. I would love to hear some suggestions on what's worked for you out there, for anybody who's either doing this at a DIY level or obviously if you have your own fitting studio. If you have any comments or critiques or questions on the process that I went through for completing this install, let me hear it down below. I'm always looking to improve the way that I am doing this stuff. And obviously this is not my full-time job. This is something I picked up at a hobby level, and hopefully I can do a better job at providing that input on future instructional videos for those of you at home. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.